Hi guys, Forgotten Wolf here, and this is the 750 like special. First off, I'm so sorry for the delay on this one. I've had a ton of stuff going on this week, so yeah, I'm not gonna waste too much time here. This special is on how Mercedes formed an F1 empire. Before we begin, please, I want to thank you guys so much for 750 likes. It's incredible that so many people decide to like these videos and enjoy them. It makes me feel a lot better knowing that some of you guys really enjoy it. And now, grab some snacks and let's begin. Mercedes entered Formula One in 2010, buying Brawn GP from Ross Brawn. Immediately, a series of smart moves was made by Mercedes that would set the foundations for the team to grow and would be made by Mercedes. The first decision was to keep Ross Brawn on as the team principal for the 2010 season, allowing him to control the team and oversee its development. Although Mercedes wanted to keep 2009 world champion Jenson Button, he declined and signed for McLaren, while the team opted not to keep Rubens Barrichello, dropping him. So to replace the two, they opted for a mix of youth and experience. Nico Rosberg signed from Williams, eager to drive for a German manufacturer, providing the team with someone they could build around for years to come. And the second driver was a legend of the sport. Michael Schumacher came out of retirement, someone to help develop the car and give relevant experience and feedback. Schumacher is one of the greatest, if not the greatest, F1 drivers ever, so he was a huge catch, and this set the F1 world on notice. And with these three moves made, it was time for the 2010 F1 season. Brawn struggled to develop at the end of 2009, so 2010 they were expected to be around a midfield team. And in 2010, the year started off well with Rosberg getting two podiums at Malaysia and China, while Schumacher struggled to keep up with his younger teammate. Mercedes would consistently score low points and the occasional podium for Rosberg, overall a solid foundation point for Mercedes, but they couldn't keep up with Red Bull, Ferrari, and McLaren. In 2011, there would be a series of major rule changes that would hurt Mercedes in a big way. Formula One would introduce DRS, Pirelli tires, and KERS all added to the car, while a ban on the F duct would be banned, and a minimum weight increase would come. In 2011, Mercedes managed to break away from the likes of Toro Rosso, Force India, and Renault, putting them firmly at the top of the midfield. However, the gap to the top teams only further increases. They struggled to adapt to the new regulations. Mercedes also had a really bad start to the year, as Rosberg failed to score in 4 out of the 7 opening rounds, while Schumacher failed to score in 3 out of the 7 rounds. Following the summer break, Rosberg and Schumacher and Mercedes would rebound, as Rosberg scored in every remaining round, excluding Italy, where he retired due to a crash on the first lap. As for Schumacher, his comeback to F1 already was looking like a mistake, as he was held back by an underperforming car and frequent mistakes. After the summer break, Schumacher DNF'd in Singapore and Korea, while he finished 15th in the season finale at Brazil. Overall, Mercedes finished 4th, nearly 100 points clear of 5th place Renault, while the team ahead of them, Ferrari, 3rd place, were 110 points ahead of Mercedes. Although Mercedes became more consistent point scorers, the increased gap to the top 3 and no podiums in 2011 meant this is overall a huge step back for Mercedes, allowing them to rebuild and start to form an F1 empire as new regulation changes would be arriving in the new horizon, so they began preparing. In 2012, Mercedes made some serious changes to the car. First off, the first change was a brand new lower front wing, and while Mercedes knew they also needed something to replace the F duct, so they had a brand new W duct designed, which was controversial, but it was legal. The W duct allowed managed airflow, allowing for increased corner balance, but crucially for them, it was legal as the driver didn't have to manually hold it. The results did not look great at first, with Rosberg and Schumacher DNFing in Australia, with Rosberg failing to score in Malaysia and Schumacher only getting 1 point. However, things would finally look up in China, where Mercedes got some upgrades that would finally come in handy, and Nico Rosberg took pole position in the race. Schumacher DNF'd with an engine failure. However, Nico Rosberg finally took his first ever win in Formula One with a dominating victory. From there, Schumacher began to struggle with even more, with 3 straight DNFs in Spain, Monaco, and Canada. And while Nico Rosberg went on to have another high in Canada with second place. It was a fairly chaotic European Grand Prix that came next, with Michael Schumacher getting his last podium in F1, and it's after this point that Mercedes started to look for alternatives to Michael Schumacher, with two people being at the top of their list: Lewis Hamilton at McLaren and Nico Hülkenberg at Force India. Hülkenberg would have certainly accepted, but more on this later. Mercedes also made some very important hires that would help them form a dynasty. Paddy Lowe agreed to join for 2013 from McLaren as their executive technical director, and Niki Lauda also joined as executive chairman in September 2012. Lauda would go on to make the most influential signing in F1 history, and after joining in September 2012, Niki Lauda finally managed to get Lewis Hamilton to sign for Mercedes from McLaren on a 3-year deal worth $15 million guaranteed per year, a huge deal that shook up the driver market and would go on to be F1's greatest ever signing. This meant that Michael Schumacher would retire at the end of the 2012 season. To win the 2012 season, I'm just going to put it bluntly, Nico Rosberg was shit, and Mercedes was for that matter, as Rosberg didn't score at all after Singapore, and Mercedes' only points after Singapore was Michael Schumacher's 7th place in Brazil, the last round of the season. Overall, another huge step back this season as Mercedes fell to 5th place, around 150 points behind 4th place Lotus. In 2013, things would finally begin to change. In 2013, Lewis Hamilton would finally join from McLaren, and Paddy Lowe as well from McLaren, and one more name would join Mercedes, and he would become in time the most powerful man in Mercedes and run the greatest empire. Coming from Williams, Toto Wolff arrived as executive director of the Mercedes F1 teams, meaning Ross Brawn and all others answered to him now. All these hires immediately hit it off, with Hamilton bagging back-to-back podiums in Malaysia and China, and then Monaco. Nico Rosberg won his home race, and a couple of races later, he won Silverstone. And in Hungary, Lewis Hamilton took his first ever win for Mercedes. However, during the summer break, Mercedes were banned from the young drivers test because of illegal testing after Spain. But after the summer break, both Hamilton and Rosberg locked in as they consistently bagged high points with the car, and all the new hires basically working together now, and this meant the car was a lot better, and they bagged high points positions. Not any wins because Vettel won every race, but Hamilton and Rosberg's efforts allowed Mercedes to jump all the way to second place in the constructors' standings, with Hamilton 4th in the drivers and Rosberg 6th. And this, for Rosberg, was his best ever season in his career to this point. With all the new hires coming off of the back of a great season, Ross Brawn was pushed out of Mercedes, and Toto Wolff took over as team principal for 2014. Overall, 2013 was a pivotal year for Mercedes, but in 2014, the power units loomed large, and a dynasty was on the horizons. In 2014, the brand new power units were here, the V6 power units. And for the past 2 years, Mercedes has been spending all their time working on these, explaining why they didn't make any meaningful improvements outside of 2013. And Niki Lauda used this fact to convince Lewis Hamilton to sign in 2013. Right away, their hard work paid off as they made Red Bull and Ferrari look absolutely silly. And although Lewis Hamilton retired with an engine issue in Australia, Nico Rosberg won the opening round in 2014 in Australia, and afterwards, Lewis Hamilton took the next 4 wins in Malaysia, Bahrain, China, and Spain. And then Rosberg won in Monaco, although there was a bit of a falling out in the team, with Hamilton accusing Rosberg of intentionally running off the road and qualifying to get pole, which Rosberg refuted, and this started the rivalry that threatened to rip the team apart. In Canada, Mercedes proved they weren't immune to issues, and their car wasn't as reliable as people thought, as both cars failed in some way. Hamilton had a DNF with brakes, and Rosberg struggled to P2 with power issues. And it could have been even worse for Rosberg if it wasn't for a late safety car thanks to Massa and Perez crashing. And this meant that Daniel Ricciardo took his first ever win for Red Bull. Mercedes' power unit was really powerful, but not reliable, as Rosberg proved, with a great pace in Silverstone, but he ended up DNFing with an engine issue in Silverstone. Yeah, well, Hamilton won. And over the next two races after Germany, which are Hungary and Belgium, the Hamilton-Rosberg rivalry was ripping and dividing the team apart. As in Hungary, Hamilton refused to let Rosberg by, costing Mercedes a chance to pick up the win. And in Belgium, Hamilton and Rosberg finally came to blows as they crashed on the first lap, with Hamilton DNFing and Rosberg managing P2, with Ricciardo taking back-to-back. However, Hamilton would dominate the rest of the season as he won every race except for Brazil, which Rosberg won. And speaking of Rosberg, he took the championship to the last round, despite a DNF in Singapore with several car issues. However, 2014 was a great success as Mercedes won both championships, and in 2015, their car was even more improved and much more reliable. However, the opponents, namely Ferrari, closed the gap massively, with Vettel now at Ferrari sneaking in 3 wins, looking much better than Mercedes did in those 3 races. Hamilton still won the 2015 championship, and Rosberg would struggle, but thanks to a great run of form to end the season, managed P2. Now, moving on to 2016, Mercedes were looking to clinch their status as a dynasty, and they improved their car a ton. So much, in fact, that the competition was not able to catch them at all, except for Spain, where the Mercedes drivers crashed, further creating a divide, and in Malaysia, where Hamilton DNF'd and Rosberg crashed on the first lap thanks to Sebastian Vettel. And in 2016, Mercedes made several changes, swapping Hamilton and Rosberg's pit crews for a still unknown reason, and Paddy Lowe announced he would leave Mercedes at the end of the season, and Mercedes would hire James Allison from Ferrari to replace him. And in the Drivers' World Championship, it was utter domination, but it would be Rosberg who finally won the World Championship, and Mercedes won the Constructors' World Championship to form a dynasty. Mercedes were now a dynasty, and they now focused on shifted their focus on defending the dynasty, namely from Ferrari, with James Allison joining. Rosberg also announced a shock retirement, so Mercedes decided not to go for a high-rated driver to compete with Hamilton and continue the rivalry, which would have almost certainly torn the team apart and really hurt them when Vettel came knocking their way. And they opted for Valtteri Bottas, a number 2 driver that would support Hamilton in the World Championship. And this would work, as from 2014 to 2020, Mercedes won every Drivers' and Constructors' World Championship, becoming the greatest dynasty F1 ever saw. Once again, thank you guys so much for 750 likes. I truly cannot thank you guys enough for this. It's incredible that we got this far, and here's to 750 more. But until then, bye!